Hey there everybody, Michael here with another video for you. And today we're going to be talking about AI and what it's going to be doing to our market as writers. For those of you who are more like readers on the channel, we're going to be talking about a little bit of what you might be seeing in the near future here. Before I do that though, for those of you who have been around for a little bit, I've been gone for a while. And why? Well, I had to write a couple books. Basically, I've been writing a lot, and two books actually published at the same time. One of them here is actually under my name. It's The Dragon's Legacy, first book of the Paragon series. Very happy to have this one out finally. It's been running around in my brain for like 15 years. So a lot of world building, a lot of plot still to come. This is just book one. I've got a lot of books planned for this one. But that one is available on Amazon. So if you want to support the channel, please go ahead and pick up the book. The other book that I have, it's a little spicy, is not under my name. So that one's not going to be shown here. But with that out of the way, I am very interested in talking about this AI and the technology that it brings, the tools that we're going to have as writers. And I first want to pre-emphasize that it is a tool. That is how I view it. It's a tool. Yes, it can be a shortcut. And we're going to go over that and how that's not going to be good. And really how if you use it as a shortcut, it's going to hurt you in the long run. But the main point is that I view it as a tool. The tool is not fully functional as well as the way that I see it so far. But it does have its place, and it does do some things pretty well. So here I am. I'm on ChatGPT. I did pay for the new version, so that way you could get access to GPT-4. As you see here, the 3.5, the reasoning and conciseness is fairly low. Over here, reasoning and conciseness is pretty high. It's just a little bit slower is all. Is that true? It kind of. I think that ChatGPT, being that it is a kind of like an all-encompassing AI, it might not do so well at certain things. And if you get an AI to just play chess or just paint or just whatever, and when I think about painting, by the way, I'm talking about like the AI that can like move an arm, not like the digital artwork. I'm talking to like actually paint on a canvas. When you program an AI to do those things, then it gets really good at those things, right? It's very, very good at those things. But from all the deep dive that I went through, the AI seems to have a pretty severe problem when it comes to rationality, basically kind of going deeper into things. And it makes sense. It's a robot, right? It's a program. Anyone who has suggested that AI is close to humans is way off. Will it get there one day? Maybe. I've heard quite a bit of talk about how the intelligence factor is growing rapidly, right? It's getting extremely smart. The difference between 3.5 and 4 is monumental, apparently. According to the developers and the people that I've watched videos on, read some articles about. So I'll take them at their word for it. I'll take them at their word that the difference between 3.5 and 4 is gigantic. The thing is that even so, AI, one of the things that it has a really difficult problem with, and I found this out, I was blown away by this. All those captchas that we do, where it's like to let you into a website to make sure that you're not a robot, figure out which stop signs or like which of these images have a stop sign and which of these images have a school bus and all that. That's literally us programming AI. We are like that information is still saved when we actually click, oh, this one, this one, this one, and this one are all stop signs, that information is saved and then either given or maybe sold, I'm not really sure how that works, to companies that then use that information to AI, so that way it better trains them. Apparently, one of the things that's really, really bad with self-driving cars is that they can't understand stop signs when they are, obfuscated by like graffiti or by maybe like heavy rain, something like that, right? So, it understands what a stop sign is. It says, okay, when I see this red octagon, then I stop, and it has like these squiggly lines in it or whatever else, and I stop for that. But if it can't see that because it's been spray painted with like a black that says, Trevor was here, something like that, whatever, then it doesn't know that that's a stop sign. It's not used to that, right? And it can't do that extra level of reasoning that says, oh, even though it has Trevor was here written on it, that's still a stop sign, and I have to stop for that, right? Or if it just sees the bottom half of a stop sign, and there's a tree on top of it pretty much, it doesn't know that's a stop sign. It has a hard time. Maybe sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, though. It has a hard time recognizing that those are stop signs, okay? And again, this is all things that I've heard from developers, so I'm just taking their word on it. If I'm wrong about that, then, sorry, but that's what I'm hearing from these developers that I'm looking into, like trying to learn more about this AI and everything, is that's one of their main problems with AI is it's not able to really take that extra step that we are and reason out that, okay, even though I only see this bottom half of a stop sign, that's still a stop sign, right? Well, I'm really seeing that here with the AI and the things that it does. So one thing I do want to kind of touch on before I go into what it's good at and what it's bad at, I'm going to touch on both here. I do want to talk about how people are like, no AI, ban AI, kill it before it kills us kind of thing. And other people are like, some people are like, doom and gloom, delusional that it's going to take over us. And I don't know if that's even delusional. Technically, maybe like in 100 years, it could really happen possibly. But, personally, I think that AI will never take over us unless we allow it to. That's basically it. But what I do see people complain about, which is a very valid argument, is that it's not... there's some ethical issues, right? Especially around the art side. When you look at this digital art, and you can type in like, and I've played around with this, by the way. I did play around with it quite a bit to really see how good it is. And I did that a few months ago. And then this was probably back in like, well, actually getting close to a year now. I think it was back in like January or August of last year, somewhere in that range. And then people started saying like, hey, this is actually plagiarizing. And I didn't understand how it was doing that. I didn't quite get that exactly. And some people were saying that it's like taking pieces of images and putting them together. And I have some questions on that. I've got some, scratch my head questions on that and some serious doubt on that, because what the developers are saying is that basically the AI, in essence, is kind of like seeing I'm going to use seeing, knowing, thinking. I'm going to use these terms, but just bear in mind, it's a program, it's a robot, it's a machine. It does not see, it doesn't think, it doesn't do any of those things, okay? But I'm still going to use those terms just because that's what we're all used to. But technically, it's supposed to be seeing an image. Think of like a TV screen with all like the color dots, and it's just, they call it noise. And then your prompt is kind of like leaning it in the direction of like, okay, you're supposed to be seeing a blue and white dragon at the top of a mountain, right? So I wanted to see, I kind of wanted to make an image that was the first scene in my first chapter of the Dragon's Legacy, right? There's a white and blue dragon in the first chapter, and I kind of wanted to just see if it could do that. And yeah, it does kind of, you might have to like kind of narrow it down to be a little bit more specific about things, right? Because I mean, like it's an Arthurian dragon type of look to it, right? And when you do that, it might give you like, okay, kind of like a D&D dragon then, right? Like, maybe that'd be a better prompt rather than saying Arthurian, because if I say Arthurian dragon, sometimes the images I got back were like, they looked like an image that someone drew in the Arthurian books, right? So like they look really terrible. So it doesn't always understand what you're really asking for, and it tries its best, right? You're kind of pushing it in that direction to see what it's supposed to be. And they explained on how they trained it and stuff. And the main problem obviously is that you can say, I want this image and this whatever in this particular person's style. And if that person is well known enough, their style is in there. I could do Frank Frazetta. Frank Frazetta is one of my favorite artists. His art just, I saw it when I was pretty young, and it just kind of like blew off the page for me. It was so, like, especially his like fantastical space cowboys and stuff like that. Like the space stuff, like really was just like, I had never imagined stuff like that, and seeing that was pretty big for me. So Frank Frazetta is a big artist that I know and that I like, and I ask it to do that, and it spits out something comparable, right? It's not as good. There's definitely something missing from it, which is probably the human touch. But I mean, it's still is passable to a degree where, like, if you showed it to somebody and said you showed them like 3 different images and said which one is the fake, it would kind of be a little hard in some cases. Sometimes it's very obvious, right? It's the one that has the 8 fingers, right? But other times it actually is difficult. Okay. Well, the same thing goes for writing. Okay. The same thing goes for writing, where you could say, I want a Stephen King book. I want this in the style of William Shakespeare. Okay. And the arguments kind of are that, hey, look, you can't copyright style. Style is not protected, really. And there's a whole debate of how long copyright should last anyways, right? I think before Disney started really politicking for it, I think it used to be like 20 or 40 years, something like that. And now it's the life of the author plus 70 years or something. It's kind of crazy. Okay. But they wanted to keep Mickey Mouse. So they kept having the politicians push it out more. So in that vein, okay, despite that potential argument of like, how long should copyright really last? The other part is that, hey, you can't copyright a style. But especially when you want to do this, okay, when would you want to tell it, write me a chapter in Stephen King style? Probably in a horror novel, right? And if you did that, it's going to have all the information on Stephen King, and there's a very good chance that it's going to kind of plagiarize. Now, I say kind of plagiarize because technically it's not plagiarizing according to the developers, where they say what it's doing is, if you see here on the screen, I said, please make 10 female first, middle, and last names using the letters in this name, Aubrey Rose Silt. And it gave me these responses, right? Now, this is a example of what it does really well. Okay, this is one of the examples I would use to tell you that if you're going to use this, here's a great use for the tool, is to tell it to do things like this for you, make you lists, so that way you could decide which one you want to use, right? Now, I asked, what is this called? What is it when you take a name and make different names out of it? And it says, when you rearrange the letters of a name or word to create a new word or name or word, it's called an anagram. Okay. Here's what it's doing according to them. It's kind of like that noise idea, right? Where it's seeing nothing, but then it is being pushed towards the next response. Okay. So I asked, what is this called? So what is this? It is smart enough to, or programmed well enough to know that I'm talking about this, right? It's in this chat log. What is this called when you take a name and make a different name out of it? It literally takes this and says, what is, not what is the answer. It's what is the most likely next word. When. What's the next most likely word? You. And the next most likely word, rearrange. The next most likely word, the. And so on and so forth. So it blows my mind that that's apparently how this is supposed to work. That it's literally populating each word individually by saying, okay, so if we have all of this, what's the next word? The next word would be when. And so if we have all of this and when, what's the next word after when? You, right? That's how it's doing it, okay? So if you told it to write you a story in the form, a horror story, in Stephen King's style, very likely you would get a line that Stephen King wrote in one of his novels. Now, even if you were told it to write a story in, horror story in Stephen King style, and you gave it all the parameters of what the story actually is, and that way it's different. Oh, it's not Stephen King's, right? It's a different story. But, Stephen King has written a lot of horror stories. Stephen King has written tons and tons of books. So the likelihood that you're going to get the same line, and that line might just be like, I don't know, she leapt out of her skin. Something like that, probably. And it'll probably be mundane because we're going to get into its faults later on here. But you will probably get a line that Stephen King actually wrote because of the way that this works is it says, what's the next most likely word? And it just keeps doing that, right? So is it plagiarizing? Well, not exactly, because it's not actually going, okay, here's a sentence that we want, and I'm just going to stick it in, right? But it is looking at all of his body of work while it's making this sentence, and it spits out a sentence that was in one of his books. The thing is, though, is that this happens quite often before AI, between us humans, right? I think I've read like one Stephen King book, okay? But very likely, I've written a line that Stephen King has written. I don't want to say like it's certain, He's written a ton of books. I've written 2 books completely, and then like 10 books or some shit, like almost all the way through. So I've got a lot of writing. He's got way more writing, don't get me wrong. So the chances are there, right? Is it like 1 in 2 billion? Is it 1 in a million? Like, what's the chance? The chance is actually pretty high, I think, right? And it's going to be coming down to those more mundane sentences like, I don't want to say like an easy one like he shrugged. Of course, we've both written he shrugged, right? But there are probably some longer, more complex sentences that are either exactly the same or very similar, right? And we as humans do this because we've all read, for the writers anyways, we've read a bunch and we write what we read, we reword it, and it, that comes out of us as our creative flow, right? So that's why I say like, yeah, it's not plagiarizing, but it is kind of, it's this weird thing because I could have read all of Stephen King's books. And I'll tell you right now, if I read all of his books, my writing would look a lot like his. Okay? My writing looks a lot like theirs. Robert Jordan, Brandon Sanderson a little bit. I've been reading more Brandon Sanderson here more recently, but Brandon Sanderson, Steven Erikson, Laurel K. Hamilton, even, I got tons of books back here, right? But my writing looks like theirs, right? but then there's also my voice on top of it. And that's the thing that the ChatGPT just doesn't have. It doesn't really have a voice. Hey there, everybody. Going to interrupt the video real fast just to remind you that you can get my first debut novel here, The Dragon's Legacy, the first book of the Paragon series. It's available now on Amazon. If you have Kindle Unlimited, you can just read it for free. Just download that. And I hope you guys all enjoy. Back to the video. That's kind of what I want to talk about as far as like banning it or not banning it. I'm not really on the side of banning it because I think that AI is going to happen whether we want it to or not. There's no stopping that. There is going to be some amount of control over it, but I also do think that it's kind of on us to control ourselves as well. Now, again, you could argue, well, hey, look, they're not going to control themselves, so why should I control myself, right? But I kind of made this analogy the other day where AI is kind of like a baseball bat, okay? Baseball bats are perfectly good instruments. They're perfectly good tools to use in the game of baseball. The pitcher throws the ball. You use the baseball bat to hit it. The ball goes flying into left field, and you run the bases, okay? A baseball bat can also smack someone in the side of the head and kill them. Now, that's not what it's meant for. So you should not be going around town smacking people on the side of the head with a baseball bat. Okay. On the other side, though, you could say that, hey, look, someone broke into my house, but I had my trusty baseball bat, and I chased him out of my house, and, you know, prevented myself from being robbed or, you know, worse. So, same thing kind of goes with AI in this sense here that, you know, yes, we have this crazy tool. It could be used for very bad purposes, but you can choose to not do those things, right? Like I'm not going to ever use this and tell it to write in someone's style, except for my own, because I'm the author and I can tell it to write in my style, okay? I'm going to show you some instances of this where I tried to get it to write in my style, and whether it succeeded or not. So I just think that it's a thing that we do have to really be careful about how we use it. It does come down to a certain degree on personal responsibility levels. We can't nerf it into the ground so that way no one could ever abuse it. No one could ever potentially abuse it. We have computers, you know. Computers are, again, a tool that really destabilized a lot of systems, and people can really abuse their computer, okay? But it's more of a net positive than it is a net negative, okay? So that's why I think this AI is more of a net positive than a net negative. And right now, too, we're in the Wild West phase of this. You think back to things like Napster, and then out of Napster eventually basically came Spotify, right? And we're back to paying for music again, right? Kind of. Either you got ads, you could have it totally for free and have ads, or you can pay your subscription fee, right? So right now we're in the Wild West, but once things kind of settle down, it might take a couple years, whatever. But I think that, you know, doom and gloom and pitchforks and torches are not the response we should have. We should have more thoughtful, more hopeful responses, and keep our heads on straight to make sure that we use this to you know, the best of our abilities, and also the best of our moral abilities as well. Okay. So let's talk about the abilities that it has, and the lack thereof in some cases. So the first thing I want to go over is actually not this one. Where is it? Is it this one? That was a short one. Well, we'll just use this one here to begin with. So basically, actually, no, we won't. I'll find it. Consistent style. Well, I guess I'll just go with this one for now. The things about this to kind of keep in mind is that it is very strong on a few things. Okay. First off, when you're prompting this, you need to kind of figure out how you want to prompt it. A little bit of research will help you out with this, but also still kind of playing around with it on your own. And kind of also you can ask it too. One of the times it wrote a chapter for me. I got it to write this chapter. It was terrible. I rewrote it and gave it back, and I asked, what should I have asked for you to write a chapter like this, right? And so it was like, oh, here's a prompt that would have had me write a chapter like this one. That didn't work. Okay, just bear in mind that even though it tells you, it's very, very confident. Don't let that fool you. It's an idiot. Okay, it's very stupid. I would put the intelligence level. The knowledge level is superhuman. Okay, the knowledge level is superhuman. The intelligence level, the wisdom, I guess you could say, actually it has no wisdom. Never mind. The intelligence level is that of like a 4 or 5 year old, right? They know they are so keen on what they're talking about that they just think that they know all of it. It's this, that. They are living in a fantasy world. That's fine. You talk to like your niece or nephew or your daughters and whoever else you got there at this age. You talk to them and they're like, yes, unicorns, they poop chocolate, but it sparkles. And the sparkles are actually rainbow candies that are radioactive because sunlight makes them sparkle with magic. And like that is like for real to them. Now, maybe somewhere down deep inside they know that that's just not true because they've never seen that before. But like sometimes they're just positive of these things. Crazy. And that's kind of how this is. I've never had it tell me I don't know that. I've had it tell me like that's not inside of my information data bank. So like if you ask it like, hey, who's playing at the local Coliseum tonight, it'd be like, I have no information on that. Please contact your local Coliseum. Here's the phone number, right? It should have that. But like, its database cutoff information, I think is like a year ago or a year and a half ago, something like that. So it doesn't know current events. And it'll tell you that it doesn't have that information. It's a little different than I don't know. It's kind of like an I don't know, but it's not really an I don't know. Then it will also have like, what else does it do? There's a couple other versions of this basically where it doesn't really say like, I don't know, but it's like, sometimes it just gets things totally wrong. It'll tell you like, oh yes, it's this. And it's like, no, it's not that. That's not that at all. I'm sorry. Sorry for the confusion. I apologize. Yes, that was incorrect. It's this. Oh, my friend Malcolm and I were trying to get it to do the Pledge of Allegiance in Morse code, and he would take it to a Morse code interpreter, and it was never correct. It could never get it right. Even when we gave it back, like, here's Morse code, that should be the first line. And it's like, yes, I see where I messed up there. I apologize. Here is the entirety of the Pledge of Allegiance. Here you go. And like, it's nowhere near long enough even. It's like it can't even possibly be the right and you just look at it and you're like, no, like, that can't be right. Because if the first line is this long and you've got this much more, like that can't be it, right? So it's sometimes it's just very positive about what it says. So sometimes when you do ask it things, it's a very good tool to ask it things and hey, I'm looking for world events at this time. What was going on? Then it could probably get that right, but you do still want to double check that, right? Because it could be wrong. It could be a little off, but it won't tell you that. It will be like, yes, I am correct. So when you're prompting it, I would say that you want to go through and you want to kind of narrow its scope down as much as possible, especially GPT-4. There are other language models out there, large language models as they're called, that are out there that are more specific to writing. But I've played with ChatGPT since it was basically free, and then when the 4 came out, I paid the $20 to play with it. So given that this one is meant to be more wide range, it's good to kind of narrow its focus down. So here I said, you are a genre author, and down here genre equals mystery. Your task is to write genre stories in a vivid and intriguing language. Answer with ... If you acknowledge, don't write anything yet. The reason I did this is I found this from another individual, and this is a really good idea to do if you're going to reuse this prompt without but basically just you're going to change the genre. So if you're going to have like a word pop up a few times, but you're going to be using this prompt over and over again, and that's the thing that you're changing is that word that comes up a bunch, then just having that word equals this is a really good way to make it to where you don't have to erase all that. You can just erase that one. And so you just tell it that. This way you're narrowing its field. You're saying that you're a mystery author. This is what you're doing right now, right? So out of all your knowledge, all you're really going to need is that mystery knowledge. And you might have to grab a couple other things here and there, but that mystery novel knowledge that you have, that's what we're looking for. Okay, bud? And it's like, yes. Okay, great. So it says ... This is also a really great prompt that I see come up quite a bit from other prompters, where you're telling it, you're basically priming it, right? But you don't want it to jump off and just start giving you crap, because it will do that. ChatGPT and other language models too. First off, they always have to respond, right? You input a thing, it has to input something back to you, okay? So it has to respond. And ChatGPT wants to be helpful. It's kind of encoded for it to be helpful and give you the answer that you're looking for, right? And that's part of the reason why it's so gung-ho and thinking that it's right. Okay, it's because it wants to be helpful. It wants to give you that answer. It's chomping at the bit to do that, or champing at the bit, however you say that. Okay, so next is another prompt. This one's a little different because technically the original person who wrote this, they were writing their own book, and they were going to have GPT write it for them, completely write it for them. So title was like this right here. Instead of saying the hero paradox, was called, or was like bracketed like this here, and said insert genre or insert title here. And then setting was, like leave information about the year, the location, like that kind of stuff. And so I basically filled it in. I filled it in manually because I already have a story. That's one of the things that I think ChatGPT is like mediocre at. It's not bad, but it's also not really good either. And that is making all this up. So the setting, the protagonist, the antagonist, the conflict, subplot, dialogue. Actually, subplot I made up myself. Dialogue, theme, tone, pacing, and then additional. All of this is, I think actually tone, that's actually fairly good on its own part, is to write that itself. Probably also pacing, it can actually do pretty good by itself. But these other things, like the real creative stuff, right? It's going to be very generic. You're going to be getting very generic results. It's going to be like you are a movie producer in Hollywood and people are just pitching you things and it's the safest shit ever, right? It's just safe, right? So it understands what a mystery is. And so it's going to give you a generic mystery novel, right? So mine is, it's like a superhero kind of thing. So basically they're superheroes, and we got our main guy, Jack. He's a former detective turned superhero, blah, 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 blah. And he's investigating a mystery that has to do with superhero stuff. And the third prompt, if you do this one where you tell it to make all this for you, that's a prompt on its own. And then the third prompt would be build a story outlines from the factors above. For people like me, for most writers who are just writing constantly, you probably don't really need this too much. You might need it though to tell it what to do. That's not a bad idea, is to have this so that way you can give it to the AI. But you probably already have a story built in your head. Anyone who's new to writing, this is still probably pretty strong for you. Again, you're probably going to have to make some adjustments to the story to make it more interesting. But yeah, it's not super bad. Okay, it's not super bad. So build story outlines from the factors above. So I told it to do all this, and so then it built this outline. Okay, and now you can tell it what kind of outline you want. If you want a 3-story act, 4 or 5. I think there's also a few other things that you can tell it to do as far as what type of outline you want. I just told it to give me an outline, so I didn't specify. And so it ended up giving me a 5-act outline. And you can kind of see here that, it goes through. This isn't super bad, but it's also not really good. I said redo the above prompt. Now this right here, I should have done back up here. I should have redone it. So you go all the way back up to the top, you click on this to redo it, and it will allow you it'll save all of that information and just let you edit it. Okay. The reason that you want to do that is so that way you don't have what's called prompt contamination. And also for the fact of because right here, this prompt here is now technically contaminating the pool. It will look back to all the previous stuff, and this is technically part of it. It's not going to, it is technically going to ignore that some, but it's not going to ignore it fully. So therefore, this is prompt contamination here, this whole section here. But if I redid this, it would basically remove this or put it kind of on a back page, and that would, let me see if I have one here right here. So this one here started to do this. I was like, nope, don't want that. So I basically regenerated the response, and it gave me another thing. So that way you don't do the contamination. And also because it only remembers so many characters. I forget how many. I think for ChatGPT 4 it's like 25,000 words. I think it's 25,000 words. It might be something with characters instead. But I think it's 25,000 words, roughly. Okay, that it will remember, and that's great. That's really good. But obviously, as the chat keeps going, it's going to eventually lose stuff. So I shouldn't have done the redo. I should have gone back up here myself. And so I do that more now often. But I told it to redo it, and then it redid it, right? I told it to redo it with some extra like little key bits or whatever. And so then it redid it. So then I took this and then I redid it. That's the main thing that you're going to want to know about this, is that there are people who are out there who are claiming that they're, making an entire book off of this kind of thing. And I just don't see that. I do not see how that's really doable, because even with just the outline, I had to rework it because it's not very good. That's the problem. It's not very good. Yes, it does add some things in that are nice, It's almost like just having another person to bounce ideas off of. Imagine your friend who knows nothing about writing, but who's just totally down to bounce ideas off of, right? That's what this is. It's like a virtual golden retriever who can speak. They know nothing, but they're just happy to be there, right? So I rewrote it. I said, here's an updated outline, and I wrote all that. And then I said, okay, great. Now create story chapters from the outlines above. We'll need at least 25 chapters. I believe, yeah. So it gave me 26 chapters instead. And I said, here's an updated chapter outline, because again, I had to go back through this and update this. Still wasn't really good. Also, too, is that even if you tell it some things, it's one of those things where it's kind of like the game of telephone, where it's going to get lost in translation. But instead of it going around the entire classroom and it's messed up, you just give it to it, and then it messes it up. So just bear that in mind too. There were a few things in here where it was like the wrong person had the wrong powers. It also wants to like rush things. So I think that it wanted to reveal the main villain's identity like really early, like who they were, and like give their background, like like describe their entire motivation for the antagonist. And it's like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to slow it down. We're not going to do that. So you really have to keep it in check here. So I, told it, here's an updated version. And I cut it down to 23 chapters. And then I said, write chapter 1 using the following style and guidelines. Okay. So now I mentioned earlier that I asked it, like, I gave it my chapter back and said, how would I have gotten you to write this? And it told me, like, okay, so tell me to use vivid descriptions, strong verbs, keep an active voice, keep the writing concise and focus on the emotions of the characters. And so I just put that in there, right? It said, and then it also said, follow the chapter points closely, incorporating these key events and emotions. And it said, then list out the events, basically. I think that it noted, like, whatever that chapter was, it noted like the events of that chapter. So that was like telling me, okay, so I need to have like an A, B, C, D, and as much as I need in order to tell it what it's going to focus on in that. But that, I found, it didn't tell me to do this, but I found that I needed to remind it to tell, like, who's POV, first person, third person, present tense, past tense. Otherwise, it seems like it will typically default to third person past tense. And I don't think that well, I guess I haven't played with it that much in third person past tense to know this, but I have the feeling that it's not going to be able to not head hop. So even if we told it to write from third person omniscient, it's still going to have problems with, like, basically writing it to where one character kind of, they have to know what the other person is thinking for them to react that way. It's done that a lot even in the first person, where it's like, she looked at him knowing that he was planning to do X, Y, and Z or whatever. And it's like, well, he doesn't know that she knows that. There's no way that he knows that she knows that. So why the fuck are you writing that? So yeah, it's going to do that to you. Same thing with text length, is that this here is very iffy. It's according to what I've heard, is that GPT-4 should be able to produce very long responses. That might just be if you actually have the API directly and not using it through Chat GPT. Because I almost can't get it to respond with anything longer than about 600 to 700 words. I think is like the max I've ever gotten out of it. And even that was like cut off. And so I had to just type in continue, and then it gave me the rest of it. So I'm pretty sure the longest I've ever gotten out of it was about 700 words. So I feel like when they're talking about how long it's able to respond for, that's only based off of if you have the direct application, the actual API. So anyways, it tried to do it here. This is not good. As you can see here, it only has 3 lines of dialogue, and then it goes into a lot of explanation and stuff. I'm not sure which one I was in or which chat I was in where I fed it my type of writing, but it didn't get there. It can never get there. That's one of the main things that I think that it really struggles with, is that yes, it did write me a chapter, nowhere near the length I asked for here, but it did write me a chapter. And I'll give this one here credit because a little bit anyways, because this one here, and maybe I just didn't say to continue. Maybe this one was supposed to be a continuation or something like that, but it seemed like it ended. I don't know, but most of the time it will give an ending that's a kind of a wrap up, like here, as we leave the meeting, I catch her gaze, the corner of her mouth curling and smiling. She walks away, leaving me to wonder if she feels the same connection I do. That one's actually not bad in comparison to the other ones. Let me see here. Little did he know that this meeting would mark the beginning of a series of events that would test not only his powers, but the very essence of what it meant to be a hero. For the everlasting, the real battle had just begun. And it's like, this is not a Saturday morning cartoon. Like, what are we doing here? Basically, even though I told it to give me a bunch of words, this whole thing here, right, is probably like 500 or 600 words. And this right here is probably something close to about 100. That's totally useless, because it's just like, it's just a summation of what the chapter's ending on and what might come in the future. And oh my gosh, it really, really wants to do this every single time. And I asked it why. I was like, hey, you're constantly doing this thing where you wrap up like this. Why do you do that? And it told me, it was like, oh, well, and I didn't ask it why, what's your programming on that? Because whenever you ask it what its programming is, for some reason it's like, I don't have access to my programming information. I'm sorry, I can't answer that. But if you ask it like, hey, why are you doing this? It told me ChatGPT is built, not, it stays away from these words of programming, right? But built to give a rounded, satisfying answer. So I ask it, hey, what's Einstein's birthday? It would give it to me, right? I ask it other questions that might have like a longer response, but that it would sum it up at the end and say, oh, it's gonna be for this or whatever. So that's why it always wants to do this. And even at one point, I broke down the chapter because I was like, look, this is not enough. So I need about 2,000 words a chapter. What if I were to break it down into pieces? And that way it would build me an entire chapter, right? If I broke it down into smaller bits. Well, at the end of every chapter, it would give me about 50 to 100 words that I couldn't use anyways, of this summation. And so it still wouldn't work. It also wants to be very happy and upbeat. I don't know. Gosh. I'm not really sure which one I was in, but it typically wants to be, upbeat and whatnot. And even though I'm doing a mystery novel, this is why I ended up having to tell it like, hey, this is an adult novel, so like keep the writing level like at adult level, please. And it did do a better job. Granted, I can give it that much. It did a better job than it did before, without that prompt. Here's me asking if you remember the plot, if you remember the outline, and it was like, yes, I remember the plot outline. Here it is. That's not correct. Please use this one. Oh, I think this is the one where I was giving it my chapters and saying, yeah, let me give you one. I have one more chapter to give you. Then and then I'll have you write a chapter. Do you remember the plot outline? And it said yes, and it didn't. So, yeah, the thing is that it's not good when you're wanting it to really write you a full on chapter. It's not going to be good for that. It's going to. A lot of times it will say things like, I think one of them, I had it write a scene where the main character Jack was walking into a gym. He was looking for somebody for the investigation. And when he goes in there, it's like, I see everyone working their hardest, trying to improve themselves, and I feel a special sense of pride in being here along with them. It's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking? He doesn't know these people. He doesn't know any of them. What are you talking about? He's like prideful of being in here. What is this? So yeah, it really goes into like the terrible. It's terrible how bad it is in that case. So as far as what it's good at, if you're a plotter, then it can definitely help you plot. Okay. If you're not really good with idea generation, it can kind of help you with idea generation. You'll probably still need to go back in there and like clean it up and whatnot. Because again, it's pretty generic on that. But and then as far as writing it for you, yeah, it can't write it for you. The best it can really do is get you past the blank page syndrome, right? Where you're looking at it and you're just like, man, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to write. I don't know. This sucks. And yeah. So here, this is the one where I gave it, and I asked if it understood my style, and it was like, yes, I understand your style. Here's 10 points that I've identified to emulate your style. And this is the part that really kind of gets me if we go back to talking about how it's supposed to be just like, okay, the next most likely response or the next most likely word would be this and then that and then this and then that. If that's really how it works, how does it infer any of this information? How does it know that my writing places a strong emphasis on the relationship between characters and often showcasing their dynamics through dialogue and shared experiences? How does it know that? Now see here, pop culture references. This here is technically wrong. Okay, I actually stay away from reality in all of my writing that I do. I try my best to stay in fiction land. So I have like my book, Dragon's Legacy, is high fantasy. The other book that I wrote, The Romance, is technically a paranormal sci-fi romance. So yes, it does have some overlay, but like we're not really dealing with that stuff. We're dealing with like the sci-fi and the paranormal aspects. So pop culture reference, you make references to pop culture such as magazines, which helps ground the story in a recognizable world. I think I mentioned magazines. I think in here, I'm not really sure where exactly, but somewhere in the writing, I mentioned that someone's reading a magazine. The end, right? So it's like, oh, there's a magazine in there. He does pop culture references. Yes. No, I don't. But I do have internal monologue. I do have descriptive language. I do have humor and sarcasm. I do characterization through dialogue. Those are all correct. Informal and conversational tone. Yeah, probably. So, does it really know? And if it does really know, then how is it only really able to spit out responses that are just one word at a time, figuring out what the next most likely word would be, going off of probability? That seems to be in conflict. Now that's just me. That's just my, amateur brain working on that. I'm not a coder. I'm not sure hell is not an AI coder. So it doesn't make sense to me, but it doesn't mean it doesn't make sense. Okay. But still, if it recognizes this, if it recognizes these things, why can't it do it? It can't. I literally had it tell me. This is the reason why I had it tell me. I didn't just say, because one time I asked it, do you understand my style? I was like, yeah, I do. Right. And obviously it didn't work. So this time I was like, if you understand my style, please list 10 points and tell me what you'll do to use to emulate my style. And it gave me that, but it didn't do it. I think that it did give me more dialogue in the next time that I had it right. But it's not able to reach that underlying level. It's not able to, even though it has the entire manuscript, the plot points, I don't think it's able to like really connect dots and to really hold on to dots and be like, okay, I have a dot here. It has no connection, so I have to make one later, and then I'll connect them. It doesn't have that. So that's why it's not really that good of a writer. It basically wants to do a lot of telling versus showing instead of showing versus telling. That's one of the downsides of it as well. I think this is all mine though. And then here, oh yeah, I had to tell it what the plot was again. And so then this is it. And this right here, honestly, this chapter here was probably one of the better chapters I'd gotten out of it. One of the best, not chapters, it's not that long. One of the best responses I got out of it. But again, this is where it's like, it summarizes at the end, so that's all useless. What I would like, honestly, I would like to be able to write my own book and then have this writing chapters for me in the background. The problem with that is that I'd like to tell it like, hey, write, because it's not going to take very long. I understand that, right? But write chapters 5 through 10 for me right now. And then it would do that while I'm writing chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. So then when I read those chapters, I can go over them, I can edit them, I can feed it back and say, hey, here's the revised chapters, here's where we're at. Now write the rest of the chapters, right? I would like for this to be able to enable me to become an editor, basically of myself. I would like to train this to where it's writing in my style, the way that I write. I'd like to know how much data that takes, though. Like, that's one question I would have is like, okay, if it can write in Shakespeare's style, you gave it everything that Shakespeare ever had, but how much did you really need to give it? The more the better, sure, but how much did you actually really need to give it? And how can I give it enough to where it recognizes everything that I've done? Because again, since it only remembers like 40,000 characters or something like that, or 25,000 characters, whatever it is, it can't read everything that I've ever written, right? My fantasy book already exceeds that. So what can we do to where I can train it on my writing so that way I can have it write just like me, and then I can basically promote myself to editor, because that's what I kind of rather do. Okay, so one other thing I want to mention here is that this is all using, ChatGPT 4, which is like I mentioned before, it's a very rounded AI. It has a lot of information on a lot of different topics. There are others. I think the most prolific for writing is Jasper. Jasper is designed for writing. And again, if you teach it to do a specific thing, then it gets very good at that thing. I haven't used Jasper because I'm pretty sure that I kind of forget what I did because I only did it for like 5 minutes. I'm pretty sure that it costs too much money for me to really dive into it. So I was like, well, you know what? I've got ChatGPT right now. It's kind of okay. But I do want to find out more about what it's going to be like for models that are specific to writing, because obviously those are the ones that are going to be able to potentially get it right, But for people who are out there using ChatGPT 4, or even worse, ChatGPT 3.5, if they're using these to really write their books and they're not actually editing them whatsoever, they're just like literally copy and pasting, they've got trash. And I understand people who are saying like, hey, look, you're flooding the market with trash, because it is. Yeah, don't do that. That's an abuse. That's using it like a baseball bat, smacking people on the side of the head. Okay, that's not good. Don't do that. We want to use this as a tool to help us, and the way to do that, at least for right now, is to use it as like questioning. So like for instance, I was asking like, hey, about basically how you capitalize queen and king, because I was getting some conflicting information from people that I was talking to over Slack, and I was like, I'm pretty sure that it's like this, and then it told me, yeah, it's like this. So yeah. So if you ever have any kind of confusion, you're just like, I'm not quite sure, you can just ask it. You can then again, doing harder things. So basically, like I thought this would be really good if you have a villain that's smarter than you, right? This would be really good because you can make riddles and things of that nature. You could make, I did an anagram here. If you've got a villain who's smarter than you, obviously as a writer, you should be pretty clever yourself, being able to, imagine these things, but you might not be able to like really pull it off, right? So you ask the AI, hey, I've got a wizard who's 100 years old. He's extremely intelligent. He would set a trap because he doesn't want the heroes walking in on him while he's doing this sort of magic spell. What is a really clever magic trap that he could create in order to stop the heroes from getting through the temple and whatever else, right? And it would probably be able to give you something pretty clever, right? I'm pretty sure that ChatGPT 4 understands what like D&D is and everything. So, it can probably pull from a lot of different sources to kind of think of, what would a very intelligent wizard do? What would be a good trap? Like that kind of thing, right? And then I could even ask it like, because maybe that trap is too smart for me. I'd be like, well, shit, how do they get out? Right? So I might have to ask it like, well, my heroes, here's my heroes. They can do the X, Y, and Z. How do they get out of it? Like what's, so if you have that kind of situation running, that you're running into where you need your villains or you need your heroes to be smarter than you, we now have a tool that can do that. And that's really important for us storytellers to have something like that. Again, we have the internet. That's a massive tool, but that does take a lot of time and research and things of that nature. So having a model like this being able to ask it questions and then give us a response, pretty simple, is really nice. So I think those are some of the best tools for it right now. As far as recommending of use, I would say that any writer should use it for that kind of reasoning, for outlining, that kind of stuff. But if other than that, not really. If you're a new author, though, again, and you don't really have a whole lot of ideas going, this could be a good idea generator for you. I would highly advise that you ask it for multiple prompts. So if you ask for a prompt and it gives you something back and you're like, oh, that's pretty nice, even if you're happy with that, it's gonna stay there. It's gonna still be there, right? Ask for another one, or ask for like 5 more, right? That way you can kind of see more ideas than just the one and taking that and running with it. So for anyone who's stuck, can't bring up an idea for whatever reason, this would be a really good way to get those juices flowing. Because even if you don't use exactly what it gave you, you could probably spiral off of it and be like, oh, you know what? I do like the idea of a sci-fi, set in the near future, but I don't like the idea of following a cop. I want to follow like a scientist or a scientist's assistant, something like that. And you can tell it that, be like, hey, okay, so let's change the protagonist to a scientist or an assistant or whatever. What do you think would be a good science field for them to be in that'd be interesting with the rest of the story? And they would tell you. So yeah, stuff like that, that's pretty good. If you're looking to have this write you novels, I think that I have seen other people have it write books that are more like kind of like self-help books almost, or like I think I saw one where a guy had it write him a book of riddles kind of thing, or a book of unique facts. I kind of forget what it was, but something like that where it's like factoids. Sure, you could probably do that. Again, you probably want to edit the hell out of it to make sure it actually reads right, because it can produce really good sentences sometimes, but a lot of times it still kind of like has a little bit of a robotic undertone to it, I guess you could say. But as for novels, yeah, it's not there yet. Not there yet. Okay, well, I hope you guys enjoyed that, found that informative. Go ahead and leave a like down below. I appreciate that. And again, if you can, go ahead and buy my new book, or if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can download it for free. I really appreciate it. You guys have a good one. Bye.